The top business stories live from the Sky News City studio. Business confidence in the UK is high and well above the long-term average, according to a Lloyds Banking Group survey published this morning. A crackdown on greenwashing by major fashion retailers from the competition regulator. And could 2024 be the year more European companies come to market? We'll be speaking live to the chief executive, who runs two major European stock exchanges. Good morning, this is Business Live with me, Ian King. Business confidence in the UK remains high, according to a closely followed survey published this morning. The regular business barometer, compiled by Lloyds Banking Group, which measures businesses' overall confidence by assessing their trading prospects and optimism for the economy, found that levels of confidence remain unchanged from those seen last month, which in turn were close to the two-year high recorded in January. The reading of 42% remains well above the survey's long-term average of 28%. With me now is Hann-Ju Ho, the senior economist at Lloyds Bank Commercial Banking. Good to see you this morning. Do these levels of optimism traditionally translate into high levels of business activity?
Well, it's a leading indicator of the economy. So we ask firms about their trading prospects for the next 12 months. So when businesses feel more confident about their trading prospects, it does tend to correlate with stronger economic growth. So I think these levels of confidence are consistent with the economy growing again and with growth being stronger than last year.
What was quite encouraging, I thought, was that you picked up on high levels of confidence in two areas in particular, manufacturing and retail, both of which have been through quite a tough period.
Yes, that's right. And when we ask firms what their concerns are, interestingly, supply chain concerns were a big one last month. But this month, that's actually fallen back. And, as you can imagine, manufacturing and retail are two of the sectors where supply chains are quite important. So I think that's one factor explaining, the pickup in confidence in those sectors.
And also construction, which we already know from the GDP figures has had a reasonably robust start to the year.
Yes, construction confidence has also trended higher over the past year as well. And that really tallies with the sort of stabilisation and tentative recovery signs in the housing market.
On the downside, you did pick up on a slight drop in confidence in services overall. What do you think was behind that?
Well, I think the figures can be a little bit volatile month to month. I think the fall should be seen in the context of the fact that in recent months it's actually been very elevated. So I wouldn't attach too much weight to the fall this month. I think the bigger picture is that it's still at a relatively high level compared to where it was a year ago.
OK, what did you pick up on in terms of hiring intentions?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one because in our survey, hiring intentions actually cooled this month. That's not to say it was negative, it wasn't. It's still positive, but not as positive as it was in recent months. And one of the interesting things is that we found that smaller companies and those in retail tended to be a bit more cautious about hiring this month. And we don't know exactly why that may be, but it might be related to the impending increases in the minimum wage.
Yeah, I mean, the labour market remains pretty tight overall. Presumably, some people are probably nervous about hiring when wage inflation remains at an elevated level.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. As I said, we don't know for certain. It's more an inference. We also found that labour shortages was another factor as well, which may have led to some caution in hiring.
Very interesting disparities geographically that you picked up on. I mean, the northeast of England and Yorkshire and Humber look very, very positive indeed. Elsewhere, West Midlands not so bright.
Yes, I think it's tempting to think of it as a north-south divide, but I think when you sort of get over the month-to-month volatilities, I think what you find is that Scotland, the north of England, and you have to add London to that mix, are probably the most confident regions. On the other hand, the South and Wales and Northern Ireland perhaps a little bit less positive. But I think the biggest story really for me is really the fact that across all regions confidence has actually improved over the past year. I think that's a more important narrative from my perspective.
And are you seeing in your business more demands for credit just now?
You have to get the appropriate person to speak about that. But certainly we're here to support businesses.
All right, and got to leave it there. Good to see you again this morning. Thank you. Some other business news stories for you now. And the North Sea oil and gas producer Etha Energy is in talks to buy the Italian producer Eni's UK operations. The deal, if it goes ahead, would make Ithaca the second largest independent operator in the UK, with stakes in 6 of the UK continental shelf's 10 biggest oil and gas fields. Those include the controversial Cambo and Rosebank oil fields. But if the deal goes ahead, Eni would emerge with between 38 and 39% of the enlarged Etha Energy. Shares of Ithaca currently up by some 3.75%. The price of cocoa hit a record high on commodity markets overnight amid signs of a global supply shortage. The New York July futures contracts touched a record high of $10,080. That was more than double the price. That's per tonne, of course. That's more than double the price just 2 months ago. Well, it follows poor crops in Ivory Coast and Ghana, the world's 2 biggest producers, due to poor weather and disease. The price increases are said to have been exacerbated by an inflow of speculative money. 2 of the world's biggest generic pharmaceuticals companies have been accused of bringing discredit on and reducing confidence in the industry in the UK. The body which administers the code of practice for the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry blamed Teva Pharmaceuticals and Daiichi Sankyo for a series of breaches. They included promoting medicine in a manner inconsistent with the particulars listed in its summary of product characteristics, providing misleading information and failing to maintain high standards. The UK commodities broker Marex Group confirmed plans today to float on Nasdaq. Marex, which employs 2,000 people around the world, also reported sales for 2023 of $1.24 billion, up 74% on 2022. The company's profits after tax rose by 36% to $141 million. Well, Marex, which has more than 4,000 clients around the world, looked at floating on the London Stock Exchange in 2021, but later changed its mind, citing difficult market conditions. And Travis Perkins said today that its chief executive, Nick Roberts, is to step down after 5 years in the job. The UK's biggest builders merchants chain said Mr Roberts, who previously led the design, engineering and project management consultancy Atkins, had agreed to remain in the role until a successor had been identified. News of his departure comes 3 weeks after Travis Perkins reported a 39% drop in annual profits. Now, several of the UK's leading fashion retailers, Asos, Boohoo and George at Asda, have this morning promised to change their behaviour following a crackdown by the competition regulator on so-called greenwashing. The 3 have promised to change the way they display, describe and promote their green credentials. And all 3 will now have to provide the Competition and Markets Authority with regular reports on how they are complying with the commitments they signed, as well as taking steps to improve their internal processes. Well, joining me now is Cecilia ParkerArana. She's the CMA's Director of Consumer Behaviour. Cecilia, good to see you this morning. In what way were these businesses misleading consumers?
Well, so the practices that we were worried about were focused really on the way they were communicating information to consumers. They have each of them had various collections of clothing which were promoted as being better for the environment, and we had concerns that some of the items appearing in those collections didn't meet the business's own criteria. We also had concerns about some of the labelling and the use of language that was appearing on the clothes, which we thought may lead consumers to conclude that they were better for the environment than they actually were.
And you began this investigation in 2022. What made you alight on these 3 businesses in particular? Did you get a lot of information from whistleblowers, for example?
We looked across the whole sector, a broad range of different businesses, and looked at what the practices were that were commonly being carried out. Boohoo, Asos and Asda are all very big retailers in the UK, so that was a driver for us taking action. But we have today also sent a message to the rest of the sector that we should really be they should really be looking at their practices to make sure that they are also in alignment with the undertakings that these 3 businesses have given us.
Does that mean you're currently putting other companies and their behaviour under the microscope?
We will continue to look at this sector. We've published an open letter to the sector today to let them know that we are continuing our endeavours in this space. And we have also committed to producing some further information and guidance for businesses in the fashion sector to really make sure that there's a level playing field and that all businesses are being held to the same standard.
What punishments could these three incur if they fail to stick to the undertakings they've given you today?
So as things currently stand, if there was a breach of the undertakings, we would have the option of going to court to ask the court to enforce those undertakings. It's worth noting that we are getting new legislative powers where future undertakings would be directly enforceable and where we would be in a position to impose penalties. But in this case, these current undertakings, we would go to court, and if the businesses didn't then comply with the court order, the court itself could impose fines on them.
How do the rules in this country around green claims compare with those in other?
I think the rules are very similar in the UK to what they are in Europe, where they're based on the same legislation. And we find across the world, really, that businesses are expected to meet broadly similar standards, whether that's in the US or Australia or here in the UK.
All right, Cecilia, got to leave it there. Good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks, Ian.
Well, last night's downbeat close on Wall Street was followed by a mixed session overnight for stocks in the Asia-Pacific region. Stocks in Hong Kong and Shanghai were under particular pressure. Shanghai, in fact, fell to a one-month low amid signs of selling by foreign investors. Well, in Europe, here's the picture right now. On mainland Europe, all the main continental European indices in positive territory just now. Talking points this morning include the fashion retailer H&M. That's up some 12% in Stockholm after its quarterly operating profit came in ahead of expectations. Well, here in London, the FTSE 100 is currently just off under a third of 1% right now. A few interesting stories to mention to you, though. The leading blue chip gainer just now is the distributor Diploma. That's currently ahead by just over 11% as news of a £236 million acquisition it's announced this morning has gone down quite well. Another major gainer to mention is DS Smith, the paper and packaging group, currently ahead by just under 8.75%. That's after it confirmed a story by Sky's Mark Kleiman last night that it's received a £5.72 billion takeover approach from the US group International Paper. That, of course, trumps an existing offer from domestic rival Mondi. Well, outside the FTSE, I mentioned earlier on Ithaca Energy. That's currently the leading gainer on those expansion plans, as I say, up by 3.75%. Meanwhile, the IT services group Softcat is ahead by some 2.5% right now, nearly. That's after a push from one of the brokers. To the downside, the fluid storage maker TI Fluid Systems is off by just over 16% right now on a big sale of shares by a major investor. And Sir Martin Sorrell's digital advertising and marketing group S4 Capital, that's currently off by 12% following a trading update during which the advertising mogul played down takeover talk. On the currency markets, well, the major story today really has been the Japanese yen. That's currently trading at its lowest level against the US dollar since 1990. Not much going on the pairs that you can see on the screen there. Cable more or less unchanged, likewise sterling euro and also euro dollar. No change at all there to mention, really. As for the oil price, well, that gave back all of Monday's gains yesterday. It's now lower on the week so far. Barrel of Brent crude will currently set you back $85.75 a barrel. That's off a little over 0.5%. Well, joining me this morning is Arabile Gday from our sister channel, CNBC. Arabile, great to have you with us. The big story in Europe is H&M, of course.
Yeah.
Not a business that's had the greatest of times lately.
No, certainly not. And I guess it's because of competition, right? I mean, let's not forget, you have the likes of Shein kind of eating into them. You have Temu also at play here in some parts. Of course, the big play in this is Inditex, the owner of Zara, right? And that's massive competition that has really eaten away at H&M's profitability as well of late. Now, the big question mark is how do they turn the business around? And really in these numbers, you actually saw the newly elected CEO, of course, who took over very recently after the surprise resignation then of Helena Helmerson. That's Daniel Ever saying then that we're going to now focus on profitability over sales. Which means that, yes, while sales is going to be a big part of the business, if you're going to focus on profitability, you're aiming to cut costs as one of the big factors at play here. While no further details was really offered on that, you did still have an operating margin rise to 3.9% from 1.3%. So there is better margins with regards to the business, perhaps consumers coming back ever so slightly, even though we're in a high interest rate environment and the cost of living crisis still hurting, but consumers perhaps beginning to come back somewhat. The big question mark is, can that be sustainable for the business?
Well, quite. I mean, that's the big question. Can one say that this business has turned a corner from its recent problems?
I think that still the proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating, unfortunately. It might take some while still. Again, you have an industry that is facing a whole heap of competition. Just this week, we also saw the likes of Asos actually struggle as well, as they brought out their numbers too. And it gives you a clear sense that if you don't find your identity really in this retail space, unfortunately, consumers are very quick and easy to just ship over to other brands. The other question at play here is sustainability. You have brands like Shein and Temu who have continued to ship out items, of course, at will to consumers, right? And the question does become, is sustainability still at play? I mean, Ian, when was the last time you heard somebody actually talk about wanting to buy an expensive item of clothing? Now it seems it doesn't matter if it's cheaper.
Well, Mrs. King does, I can tell you that.
Certainly, I thought that was the case for me too, but that might have gone by the wayside for some as well in this market at this stage.
Yeah. Now closer to home, S4 Capital. You guys had Martin Sorrell on this morning. I mean, he's relentlessly chipper, but the numbers weren't terribly good today.
They really weren't. And I mean, if we go down the list of these numbers, right, a 2.1% decline in reported revenue, that's on a total basis. But on a like-for-like basis, that's a 4.5% decline. He had initially put forward a revised estimate of a 4% decline that they had initially anticipated here. So 4.5% gives you a clear sense that things aren't doing necessarily too well. It's a digital and marketing advertising agency here who is seeing that there's a lot of consumers, there's a lot of companies that are perhaps looking and cutting back some of their advertising spend, right? We're seeing it even in the bigger players, whether you are in tech or whether you're in other spaces as well, retail and the like. That has become a big worry. But what we are seeing, though, is that they are trying to maintain a prudent approach to other aspects of their business. So they are meeting some financial targets. Their earnings before tax, depreciation and amortization, that did come under pressure, but is looking better.
All right, Arabile, I know you guys start ridiculously early in the morning. Do appreciate you hanging around to speak to us.
Of course, anytime, Ian.
Still to come here on Business Live. Could more European companies be coming to market this year? We'll be speaking live next to the chief executive of the SIX Group, which owns the Swiss and Madrid stock markets. Don't go away.
When, thinking of a challenge of this magnitude, I wanted to, do it for a cause that was really, really close to my heart. When thinking of issues to money raised for, I thought male suicide is just, at the moment, it's a really, really big issue in this country. The biggest killer of males under 50 in the whole of the UK is suicide, and almost 75% of suicides are all male. So when thinking of this challenge and, the potential to fundraise, I thought, men's mental health, brothers in arms, this is perfect. Being from Scotland, it's not often that we get to international tournaments. So when we qualified for the Euros in the summer of 2024, I thought, right, how am I going to get there? I've always had a sort of passion for travel and, exploring. So when the idea came across me to walk from Hampden to Munich, and I thought of the potentials to raise funds, I thought, I need to do this. When you get down a rabbit hole and you just think, I need to do this passion project. So that's exactly why. And, the kilt is a historic symbol of, Scottish culture and a big tie to the Tartan Army, the Scotland fans. I've been splitting my training into two parts, keeping up, my weight training, cardio, and just making sure that I'm in sort of my peak physical health going into this, and the second one, the more boring part as well, just getting the miles in, going big, long walks, and really just preparing my body for what it's going to endure over the course of the challenge. We start at Hampden, where we go over across to Hull. From Hull, we get the ferry to Rotterdam, down to Belgium, into Luxembourg, and then across to Munich for the final stretch.
traveling is not just about the destination. It's also about how you get there. Fly Emirates, fly better. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Welcome back. Just want to bring you some breaking news that's reached us in the last few moments, which is that Tom Hayes, who was the first trader worldwide to be jailed for LIBOR rigging, has lost an appeal against his conviction. Mr Hayes, of course, a former star trader at UBS and Citigroup. He was imprisoned for several years for those misdemeanours. The Court of Appeal has rejected his appeal against that finding today. Also, alongside him was Carlo Palumbo, who was a former trader at Barclays, who was likewise convicted. He too has had his appeal overturned by the Court of Appeal. The pair have been given leave to take that to the Supreme Court and appeal there, should they so wish. Now, last week saw the biggest stock market flotation so far this year in Europe, with the skincare group Galderma achieving a valuation of 15.2 billion Swiss francs, around £13.3 billion, as it made its debut on the Swiss Stock Exchange. It's raised hopes that after a disappointing 2023, more European companies may come to market this year. Well, with me now to talk about this is Jos Dijsselhof. He's the chief executive of SIX Group, owner of the Swiss and Madrid stock exchanges. Jos, good to see you this morning. How important was Galderma's IPO in terms of generating confidence?
Well, good to be here, Ian. I think it is always really important to see the first company go when the window of IPO starts to open up. And this, of course, is a very, very good company in terms of their business, their profile, the way it fits into the sectors that we're very strong at in Switzerland, and, of course, a big size IPO. So all these criteria will hopefully help to open up the IPO window a bit more. Yeah,
big size IPO and a decent aftermarket as well. Good gains on the first day.
Yes, the first couple of days have been really good. So it is also a strong follow through on the IPO. So we're very happy about that.
I mean, looking at the pipeline of European businesses looking to list this year, I mean, an awful lot of them appear to be in Spain.
Yeah, well, we have both in Spain and Switzerland a very healthy pipeline of IPOs. Some have communicated already, others might have not, but we have, of course, our backlog and our list. We've seen 2 smaller IPOs already in Spain, but there are also a couple of bigger ones coming in Spain. So we're quite bullish about both the Swiss and the Spanish stock market.
There are a lot of concerns, obviously, in London about companies moving their main listing to New York. I mean, only yesterday, Flutter Entertainment confirmed they would be doing so. Do you have similar concerns in your markets?
I think companies have more choice, and the default of always listing in a company where the company's headquarters is not so strong anymore as it used to be. But I think we are fairly competitive. The Swiss market is really one of the best markets in the world, 2.25 times the GDP, so a really important market in Switzerland and in Europe. And the Spanish market, with the Spanish economy growing quite nicely, faster than many other European countries, I think it's a very attractive market also. We have competition, but we are also confident about the strength of our markets.
Who do you regard as the main competition? Is it someone like Euronext, who I know you worked for in a past life?
Yeah, for some listings it is Euronext. For some listings it's the US. For some listings it's even London. So we are working in a competitive environment, and we need to be competitive to attract the right companies. But of course we have very strong sectors, both in Spain and in Switzerland, which is really helpful, of course.
Now, there's been a fair bit of deal-making by financial market infrastructure providers like yourself in recent times. You've been very clear you want to be a participant in that. What sort of things have you got in mind?
Yeah, we think the financial market infrastructure is still going to consolidate more. As you know, we have 4 businesses. We have the stock exchange business, the whole post-trade business, a data business of size, 27% of our total revenue, and we have a local payments business in Switzerland. And along all those 4 businesses, we are looking at organic growth primarily, but if there's inorganic opportunities, then we will also look into that.
I mean, it's interesting. LSEG, the owner of the London Stock Exchange, I mean, they are now basically a data and analytics company. Is that ultimately the sort of destination for SIX Group?
You know, we are quite happy with the business portfolio that we have with payments, data, and stock exchange or capital markets business. And the distribution of those businesses is working quite well. We see less IPOs, you mentioned it last year, less trading also last year, but then we see our post-trade business doing really well. So I think we're pretty well set up. We don't need to have so much data business as the LSEG has, but it's an important part of our portfolio, for sure.
Now, just before Christmas, the UK and Switzerland signed a mutual recognition agreement over financial services. What are the benefits that are going to emerge from that?
I think the benefits that you don't have to apply for everything on both sides and that you mutually recognize the standards and the processes that you have in each country, and therefore it's easier to do business. That's the main advantage. And I'm very happy that this has now been established between Switzerland and the UK. I would love to have something like this between Switzerland and the EU also.
Yeah, what's holding that up?
Yeah, technically we are equivalent and everything else, but there is the overall political discussion between Switzerland and the EU, which goes a bit above my pay grade, and is more political perhaps than business. But that's really holding up these mutual recognitions. But of course we have the fortunate situation that we have our Spanish business. So if there is business that we want to do in the EU and it's better for our customers to do it through Spain, then we can do it there. So we're hedged from that perspective.
Foot in both camps. I mean, looking at Spain in particular, do you see more companies from outside Spain listing in Madrid?
I think there is some interest. The SME, what we call the growth segment, is very strong. We've been building that up in Spain for many, many years now. And it's one of the more attractive places to list for as an SME. But of course, there are also certain segments like renewables, energy, where Spain is very strong. So it might also be that some companies want to list in the same place to be part of a certain segment and have comparables. So that's where we have the competitive edge.
OK, yes, we've got to leave it there. It's been a while since we had you on the programme. It's great to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
That's it from me for now. I will be back with our afternoon edition of Business Live at 4:30. Hope very much to see you then. Thanks for joining me this morning. See you later. Cheerio.